on Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
My sister and her boyfriend were arrested trying to rob my house, but my mother insists that I am the selfish one after 12 years of struggle. I never thought the day would come when I would label my family as toxic. However, there are scars from the past that never fully heal. I was barely 16 when my mother kicked me out of the house. It wasn't for using substances or for stealing or for some serious transgression, no. It was simply for having a boyfriend. I still remember the night she found out. She was furious, screaming about how I was an embarrassment and how I was going to disgrace the whole family. I tried to reason with her, to explain that it wasn't serious. But she flatly refused to listen to me. She packed my suitcase, pushed it into my hands, and told me to fend for myself if I thought I was so grown up. My options were limited at the time. I stayed on a friend's sofa for a few weeks while I continued to attend school and got a job in a restaurant. It wasn't ideal, and it definitely wasn't easy, but it kept me afloat. I worked double shifts, saved every penny I could, and finally got my diploma. It took years of effort and sacrifice, but I managed to get ahead. By the time I was 28, I had a stable job in the financial sector and enough savings to buy something I had always dreamed of, a small vacation home by a lake. That property meant much more than just a building to me. It represented everything I had endured and overcome. It wasn't huge or luxurious, but it belonged to me. I spent weekends there, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, feeling that I had finally achieved a certain inner peace. My younger sister, Lisa, was always the favorite. She was the one my mother constantly spoiled, the one who could never make a mistake. When she became pregnant during her second year of college, my mother's reaction was completely opposite to when I simply had a boyfriend. Instead of indignation, she showed total understanding. Yes, Lisa had made a mistake. But she was just a kid. Mom welcomed her home with open arms and dropped everything to help her. Lisa's boyfriend Danny wasn't exactly a catch. He didn't work, he lacked ambition, and he was content to live off Lisa and my mom. But Mom loved to talk about how they would make it all work, and how the baby would strengthen the family bond. For years, I just let it go. I didn't visit often, but I still sent gifts for birthdays and holidays. I tried to maintain some connection, even though every conversation with Mom seemed like a subtle reminder that I wasn't as important as Lisa. The call came on a Sunday morning while I was enjoying my coffee at the lake house. I knew something was wrong as soon as I saw Mom's name on the screen. She never called unless she needed something. She started with a brief chat about nothing in particular, asking how I was and what I had been up to lately. But it didn't take her long to get to the point. Lisa and Danny were planning to get married and needed a place to live. I asked her why she was telling me this, and that's when she dropped the bombshell. She wanted me to give them my house on the lake as a wedding present. She argued that they needed a head start, and that my house would be perfect for raising their child. She went on to explain how they couldn't afford to rent a decent place, and how Danny was really trying to find a job. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her clearly that the house was not available. I explained that I had worked hard to buy it and that it had great sentimental value for me. She didn't care at all. She accused me of being selfish and said that the family should support each other. She reminded me that Lisa had a baby to think about while I didn't have any children. Therefore, according to her, I didn't need the house as much as they did. I asked her where all that family concern had been when I was 16 and left homeless. Her response: that was different because I brought it on myself. The conversation escalated quickly. She accused me of holding a grudge and claimed I was punishing Lisa for something that wasn't her fault. I replied that Lisa's decisions were her sole responsibility. I wasn't going to sacrifice my hard-won stability for the mistakes of others. At the end of the call, Mom was shouting, saying she couldn't believe how insensitive I had become. She hung up, but not before telling me she hoped I would reconsider my position. I made it clear to her that I wouldn't. Over the next few days, I started to receive messages from Lisa. She said she couldn't believe my cruelty, and that I was basically condemning her son to a life of deprivation. Danny also got involved, sending me a long message about how he had always admired me and hoped I would see the bigger picture. I replied that I couldn't believe how insensitive they were about bringing a child into the world in their current circumstances, when I was just starting to consider having one myself. It was almost laughable how they were trying to emotionally manipulate me into giving up my property. But I wasn't laughing, I was furious. The last straw was when Mom sent me a long message, setting out all the reasons why I supposedly owed this to Lisa. She talked about how I was the successful one, how I had more than enough, and how Lisa just needed a little help to get her life back on track. I knew that any response from me would only aggravate the situation. But I also knew that this wouldn't end here. Mom and Lisa weren't the type to take no for an answer. Update 1. I thought the calls and messages were annoying, but they were nothing compared to what happened next. Her next move took the situation to a whole different level. I had just finished a long day at work. I was looking forward to going to the lake house for the weekend to relax and clear my head after the drama with Mom and Lisa. When my phone vibrated, I almost ignored it, but something told me I should check it. It was a notification from my home security app informing me that it had detected movement on the property. I opened the live stream and felt a pit in my stomach. Lisa and Danny were on my porch, tampering with the door. I could see Danny holding a crowbar, trying to force the lock open, while Lisa stood behind him, looking nervously around. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. My hands were shaking as I called the local police department. I explained the situation and asked them to send someone immediately. The operator assured me that officers were on their way, but those minutes of waiting seemed like an eternity. As I watched them through the camera, I could faintly hear their voices on the transmission. Lisa was urging Danny to hurry up, saying they couldn't risk being discovered. Danny snapped at her, saying it was her fault they had to do this because she hadn't managed to convince me to give up the house. When the police arrived, Lisa and Danny panicked. They tried to run away, but it was too late. The officers arrested them and questioned them right there on the porch. I could hear Lisa sobbing, telling the officers that it was all a misunderstanding and that she thought she had permission to be there. I gave the officers access to the security footage, which clearly showed Danny trying to break in. They ended up arresting him for attempted burglary, and Lisa was arrested as an accomplice. The whole incident left me shocked. I couldn't understand how far they were willing to go. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the blatant disrespect for me and everything I had worked for. The next day, my mom called me furious. She said that I had completely overreacted by involving the police, that I should have taken it lightly because, in her words, they were just kids. I replied that young people should not be having children or breaking into other people's properties. I reminded her that Lisa was an adult woman, a mother-to-be, and someone who was about to get married. I asked her how much longer she would continue to justify their actions. Mom did not like my answer and again accused me of being insensitive, adding that if I really cared about the family, I would not have escalated the situation. I made it clear to her that it was Lisa and Danny who escalated the conflict by trying to break into my house. I told her that, since she liked to use the family argument so much, she should reconsider calling me part of the family, since she had excluded me a long time ago. The conversation ended with Mom hanging up on me again. I was used to this by now. Update 2. The consequences of the break-in attempt turned out to be worse than I anticipated. Lisa stopped calling and sending messages, which I sincerely appreciated, but Mom stepped up her efforts. She started calling daily, leaving voice messages that ranged from tearful pleas to outbursts of anger. At one point, she even showed up at my apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, she launched straight into a speech about how I was destroying the family. She claimed that Lisa was devastated, that Danny felt humiliated, and that I was the only one who could fix the situation. She begged me to drop the charges against Danny and Lisa and let them keep the house. I replied that I would not withdraw anything and that the house was out of the question. I added that I was tired of being responsible for their bad decisions. It was then that she used her final argument. She said that if I didn't do this for Lisa, I would regret it for the rest of my life. She said that family was the only thing that mattered, and once it was lost forever. His words affected me more than I expected, and for a brief moment I wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I remembered everything he had faced. Being thrown out at the age of 16, struggling to build a life from scratch, and never receiving help from anyone. I asked her if she had ever regretted throwing me out of the house at 16. because she certainly didn't look like she had. She started to stutter. I told her that family relationships work both ways, and that I wasn't going to sacrifice myself for people who had never been there for me when I needed them. She looked at me as if I had just slapped her. Without saying another word, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. After she left, I experienced a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I knew I had done the right thing, but it was still difficult to face her like that. Later that night, I received a text message from Lisa. It was brief and to the point, "You've ruined my life." I didn't reply. I knew it was pointless. But then I was tempted and I wrote back, "You're ruining your son's life. Consider adoption." Even I knew how to play the blame game. Over the next few days, I focused on myself. I spent more time at the lake house trying to find peace in the silence and solitude. But the nagging feeling that this wasn't over kept coming back. Update 3. Indeed, Mom and Lisa had another strategy up their sleeves, and it was something I never anticipated. I thought the break-in incident and Mom's dramatic visit had been the culmination of this disaster, but I was wrong. Just when I thought I had a break, Lisa and Danny managed to take the situation to a new low. It all started with a series of posts on social media. Lisa used her accounts to present me as the villain of this whole story. She wrote about how I was hoarding a vacation home, while she, a struggling mother-to-be, was on the verge of homelessness. She conveniently omitted the part about the attempted break-in, their arrest, and how Mom had bailed them out. The posts oozed exaggerated drama. She shared photographs of herself looking tearful, standing in front of a small apartment with texts imploring compassion. She claimed she couldn't believe her own sister would turn her back on her at such a critical time. The comments were mixed. Some people, mainly mutual acquaintances, criticized her for airing private matters publicly, but others, her friends, Danny's friends, and even distant relatives, came to her defense. They said things like, "Families should support each other no matter what, and that I should be ashamed of my behavior." Mom made no secret of her position. She commented on Lisa's posts, agreeing with them and expressing disbelief at my supposed insensitivity. At first, I decided to ignore it. I thought that those who knew the truth wouldn't be fooled by Lisa's sob story, and I didn't really care about those who didn't know it. But then Lisa crossed a line. She posted a photograph of my lake house with a caption that read something like, "This is the house my selfish sister keeps for herself while I struggle to keep a roof over my head." The image had clearly been taken just before her arrest. It was of poor quality, but the house was unmistakable. I realized with a nauseating shock that Lisa must have captured it during the attempted break-in. The comments multiplied. People began to speculate about the location of the house and its value. Some even joked about showing up there on their own to claim it for Lisa. It was then that I realized I could no longer remain silent. I contacted a lawyer to find out what my options were. He recommended that I file a restraining order against Lisa and Danny, citing the break-in and the social media harassment. He also suggested sending a cease and desist letter to Lisa, asking her to remove the posts. The restraining order was quickly granted, given the evidence I presented, but the damage was already done. I felt that my privacy had been violated in the worst possible way, and it was no longer just about the house. It was about protecting myself from people who clearly lacked boundaries. After the restraining order was issued, Lisa finally stopped posting about me online. But that didn't mean the drama was over. Instead, Mom decided to take matters into her own hands. She showed up at my lake house, unannounced, on a Saturday morning. I was outside, tending to the garden, when I heard her car approaching. I hadn't invited her, and I certainly didn't want to deal with her, but I knew that ignoring her would only make the situation worse. Mom wasted no time getting straight to the point. She said she was there to talk some sense into me, because according to her, I had destroyed my relationship with Lisa and ruined the family reputation. She launched into a long speech about how the family should stick together, how Lisa was suffering, and how I had turned my back on her when she needed me most. She claimed that I was being selfish, hoarding my success while Lisa was going under. I let her talk for a while, mainly because I needed time to collect my thoughts. When she finally paused for breath, I told her I wasn't going to apologize for protecting what was mine. I reminded her that Lisa had tried to break into my house, that both she and Danny had been arrested, that Lisa had publicly humiliated me on the internet, and that she had backed them up every step of the way. I asked her how she expected all that to make me inclined to help them. Mom dismissed it as if it didn't matter. She said Lisa was simply desperate and didn't know what else to do. She added that I should understand, because after all, I too was young and reckless at one time. That was the last straw. I told Mom that there is a big difference between being young and making mistakes and being an adult who refuses to take responsibility for their actions. I reminded her that when I was Lisa's age, I didn't receive any help or understanding. I was kicked out of the house just for having a boyfriend. Mom tried to interrupt me, but I wouldn't let her. I told her that for years I had worked hard to build a life for myself without anyone's help. I wasn't going to let Lisa and Danny take that away from me just because they were incapable of organizing themselves. The conversation quickly turned heated. Mom accused me of being bitter and holding grudges. She claimed that I was punishing Lisa for something that happened years ago, and that I needed to get over it for the good of the family. I replied that this was not the case at all. I told her that I was simply standing up for myself for the first time in my life, and that if she and Lisa couldn't accept that, it was their problem, not mine. I suggested that she throw Lisa out or give her her own house since she was such a devoted mother. Mom left in a rage, but as she drove away, I felt relief. In the days that followed, I heard nothing from Mom or Lisa, which was a welcome change. I focused on getting back to my normal routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. Update 4. I sat down at my desk, staring at the blank screen. A storm of emotions raged inside me. Anger, frustration, sadness, and, above all, exhaustion. Mom and Lisa had distorted the narrative so much that mutual acquaintances had started to contact me, urging me to reconsider my decision. Some of their messages were downright cruel. It became clear that remaining silent was no longer a viable option. If they wanted to present me as the villain, I had every right to expose the truth. With a deep sigh, I began to write, revealing everything as clearly and honestly as possible. I started from the beginning, explaining how I had been thrown out of the house at the age of 16 for the alleged crime of having a boyfriend. I described the years I spent struggling to survive, working late hours while finishing secondary education, and, finally, building the career that allowed me to save up to buy the house by the lake. Then I turned my attention to Lisa. I revealed how she had become pregnant during university, dropped out, and returned home to her boyfriend Danny, who had no job and no intention of finding one. I described how they had repeatedly asked for help, first from Mom and then from me, despite having done nothing to earn my trust or respect. Finally, I addressed the turning point, their attempt to break into my vacation home. I described the broken window, the absolute audacity of their actions, and how Mom had downplayed it as simple, youthful recklessness. To make it absolutely clear, I added that the lake house was exclusively mine, purchased with my hard-earned money after years of sacrifice. I wrote that I had no obligation, legal, moral, or otherwise, to hand it over to anyone, especially not to people who had treated me as little more than an emergency resource. I reread the post 3 times before pressing the button to share it. It was direct, but not cruel. It was objective, but not devoid of emotion. It wasn't meant to generate pity, just to clarify the situation. Within minutes, the post began to gain visibility. Comments started to appear, and for the first time I felt a sense of validation. Strangers expressed their support, condemning the manipulative behavior and entitled attitude I had endured. Some people shared similar experiences with toxic family dynamics, while others offered advice or words of encouragement. Some asked why I hadn't cut off contact before, and honestly, I didn't have a convincing answer. Perhaps I had kept hoping that things would improve, perhaps I had feared the consequences, but now, as I watched the truth spread, I felt lighter. Of course, not everyone showed solidarity. Some family members suggested that I should have kept the matter private. I warned them that if they didn't keep quiet, I would publish the messages they had sent me next. Part of me felt some guilt, but then I remembered how publicly Lisa and Mom had conducted their campaign against me. They had chosen to involve others by using half-truths and outright lies. I was simply defending myself. The reactions were immediate. Lisa was the first to respond. Flooding my phone with angry messages, she accused me of ruining her reputation and jeopardizing her future and Danny's. I wondered, What future exactly? Mom was not far behind, although her messages were less angry and more pleading. She begged me to remove the post, claiming it would humiliate the family and create an irreparable rift. I replied that it was precisely because I had remained silent that they had acted in that way. I warned her that if they attacked me again, I would not hold back. Later that night, I received a call from a mutual friend who had seen the post. She informed me that Lisa and Danny were upset. Danny was threatening to sue me for defamation. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Everything I had written was true, and I had the screenshots to prove it. But what financial resources did she have to sue me with? As I prepared to go to sleep that night, I experienced a feeling of peace. You were all right. I should no longer be an easy target. Update 5. It was late at night when my phone rang, Lisa's name flashing on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting the call go to voicemail, but finally I answered, prepared for any barrage of accusations she might hurl at me. I had the recorder on. Instead, what I heard were sobs. Not her usual manipulative tears, but a deep, heart-wrenching crying that made me pause. Before I could even ask, Lisa began to speak, or rather to lament. Danny had ended their relationship. He had packed his things and left, blaming her for everything. The negative reaction to my publication, her lack of stability, and the increasing pressure of their upcoming wedding. She said that he had told her that she was toxic and that he could no longer bear her. Her words were interrupted by whimpers and gasps as she repeated the same thing over and over again. She said she didn't know what to do. She was terrified and alone, and didn't think she could cope with bringing up a child on her own. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt sympathy for her, but then the anger resurfaced, bubbling up with an intensity that surprised even myself. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, but the words came out sharp and cold. I told her she had no one to blame but herself. She had decided to bring a baby into the world without any plan, without considering the consequences, and with a man who was clearly incapable of being a supportive partner. I asked her what she had been thinking, if she really believed that Danny, who couldn't hold down a job or take on responsibilities for himself, would magically transform into a reliable husband and father. He tried to interrupt me, but I wasn't finished. I reminded him that he had spent weeks attacking me, trying to make me feel guilty so that I would hand over something that I had worked tirelessly for. I asked him if he was in his right mind when he decided to break into my house, when he was there with Danny, and thought it was acceptable to try to take what didn't belong to him. By now, her sobbing had subsided, replaced by an almost stunned silence. But I wasn't finished. I told her that life wasn't a story where everyone else fixes your mistakes. I asked her how she planned to look after a child when she couldn't even look after herself. Did she think that Mom would just appear to solve all her problems? Or did she still cling to the illusion that I would come to her rescue despite everything she had put me through? Finally, she found her voice, weak and trembling, accusing me of being insensitive. She said that I didn't understand how difficult her life was and how much pressure she was under. I couldn't help but laugh. I told her that I knew full well how difficult life could be, because I had experienced it firsthand. I reminded her how I had been expelled at the age of 16, forced to fend for myself without any safety net, no one to call for help. I pointed out that the difference between us was that I had taken responsibility for my life and achieved something with it, while she had spent her life blaming everyone else for her mistakes. The line went silent again, but this time I didn't wait for a reply. I had said all that needed to be said. With a final scathing comment about how it was time for her to grow up, I hung up the phone and let out a long, shaky sigh. I felt no guilt, no lingering doubts. Lisa had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. It wasn't my responsibility to fix her life, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. Update 6. I was about to relax and call it a day when the doorbell rang. Glancing at the clock, I frowned. It was late, and I wasn't expecting visitors. When I looked through the peephole, I felt a knot in my stomach. It was Mom. With a sigh, I opened the door but didn't step aside to let her in. There she was, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen her. Her eyes scanned the place as if she were mentally rehearsing what to say. I crossed my arms and waited, but before she could utter a single word, I stopped her. "If you're here to lecture me about Lisa or beg me to clean up her mess," I said, "save your breath." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, clearly taken by surprise, but I didn't let her recover. I lashed out at her with everything I had been holding in for years. I told her that she had been the worst mother I could have imagined. I asked her how she could have expelled me at the age of 16 for something as trivial as having a boyfriend, throwing me into a precarious situation without thinking twice. I questioned how she could sleep peacefully knowing that she had forced me to fend for myself as a teenager, while Lisa was given unlimited opportunities to make mistakes without consequences. Her hands were shaking, and she tried to stammer an excuse about being under stress at the time, but I cut her off. I told her that experiencing stress did not give her the right to abandon one daughter while indulging another to the point of encouraging her irresponsible behavior. I pointed out how she had spent years sacrificing herself for Lisa, always solving her problems, and now she had the audacity to show up at my door, expecting me to do exactly the same. I saw her flinch when I raised my voice. I told her that I would no longer be the family punching bag, and if she thought she could manipulate me with feelings of guilt, she was completely wrong. Finally, she found her voice, albeit a trembling one, trying to argue that I was being unfair, that I had made mistakes, but that I was just trying to keep the family together. I laughed bitterly and told her that if she really wanted to preserve the family unit, she should have started by treating her children fairly instead of making me the antagonist, while presenting Lisa as the helpless victim. Her face fell, but I felt no sympathy. I told her this was her problem to solve, not mine, and that if she ever tried to show up at my door again with this nonsense, I would report her for harassment. She tried to protest, claiming that she was only trying to help Lisa, but I refused to tolerate it. I told her that it was her responsibility for having exclusively helped one daughter all her life. I would not allow her or Lisa to destroy everything. She stood there, stunned in silence, her mouth opening and closing, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. I gave her no chance to recover. With one last piercing look, I firmly closed the door in her face. I knew she would probably describe me as the villain to anyone willing to listen, but I have decided to completely cut off contact with all of them,